Hello, this is episode 2 of Words with Wordsmiths. I'm Lebaff, the host, and I'm here with Amawsley, and he's going to give a brief introduction to himself.
Hey Lebaff, my name is Amawsley. I've recently put out my first book, Bad All Day, which is an indie published novel about Harvey, a worn-out warehouse worker who is desperately trying to hold on to a life in the arts by starting a band, but with one catch, a 1-year time limit.
And what is the purpose of the 1-year time limit? Is that character self-imposed, or is there something deeper that'll be delved into in the book?
It definitely is delved into deeper, but it is a self-imposed time limit based on Harvey's past with his art projects. And as it covers in the beginning, he's had several different art adventures where he's tried everything, and it all seems to either explode or implode, and there's some catastrophic failure that leaves him stranded on this emotional island where he doesn't know what to do next. And so when this new thing comes around, starting a band, he decides he's going to set a hard time limit before the inevitable explosion.
Understandable. And what genre would you consider your book?
I'm calling this a dark comedy urban adventure.
This is definitely an interesting set of titles, and it makes me intrigued. So let's dial it back a little bit. Where do you get a lot of your inspiration for your writing?
I'm lucky enough that I've collected notebooks and voice recorder files and you name it. Anytime I had an idea over the years, it was recorded in some way. So while I do still get inspired by just living life, coming across interesting people and, having interesting things happen to me, I always have a treasure chest of notebooks and voice recorders that I can go through dating back to when I was about 15 or 16. So you never really know where an idea is going to fit.
And how does that affect your writing process, especially when starting a new book?
Well, it was something that I put into full use during Bad All Day. What I did was I sat down with all my notebooks and I basically culled that down into a usable collection of what I thought might work in the book. Because the book, like I said, it's an urban adventure, so sort of ideas centered around moving around and engaging with things in the city, and it's about a band, so musical-based ideas. So that sort of framework dictated what ideas were taken out of the encyclopedia, I'll call it, and put into my little working Bible for the book. And I'm working on a second book right now, and the same process is going to be used, and it worked really well. What ended up happening was I would basically highlight ideas as they were used, so that as I'm reading through the ideas, I'm not reading the same thing over and over. Or worse, I used the same idea twice accidentally, but I found that was really useful. And then during the writing, it would naturally, organically lead to more ideas. So I don't know the equation would it be 50-50? I'm not sure. 50% old ideas, 50% new ideas made up on the spot. Not really sure, but just one thing definitely led to another.
Understandable. And how does technology involved or not involved in your creative writing process? Notepads or anything like that?
It's an interesting question, especially today. I definitely don't use modern technology as much. I'm very much an old-fashioned kind of guy. I do use a computer to type just because it's faster, but I do enjoy just going somewhere and writing on a notepad. That's about as technical as I get, a keyboard and a monitor. I just find removing myself from technological distractions is the best way for me to work. Writing on a pad is my favorite, but you just get a cramped wrist after a while. So I'll try to have a voice recorder handy so I could sort of, if I'm writing and the inspiration's flowing and my hand just can't keep up, I'll switch to voice recorder and then I'll just transcribe that back to what I'm writing later on. But yeah, I like to kind of mix it up a little bit, but I don't get too technical.
And what about if you were to hit any roadblocks writer's block, things like that. Is there something that helps you through that process?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I've definitely had some cement walls I've hit, and what has happened, or sorry, what has helped is just trying to work on something else. And I have a hard time not working on more than one project at a time, as bad as that is, because I definitely don't move as fast as I could through projects, but my mind just doesn't work that way. I sort of have to be juggling a couple balls in the air at the same time. And when the tap runs dry on one, I'll try to jump to another. But also, I think everyone working on a creative project has to do sometimes. You just have to walk away, and you have to realize that the gas, the tank will run dry after a while, and you just need to let it refuel. And unfortunately, I wish I knew the cure-all to suddenly refill the tank with gas, but I think it's just naturally it will fill up. It's just when, and sometimes it takes longer than other times.
Is music in your creative writing process at all?
Yes, music is a big part of my process. I almost always have music on. I think for a lot of people it would be a distraction. I think it almost distracts me from where my mind might go were I not listening to the music. So I do sort of pick music that is fitting the mood that I'm trying to hit, and it's usually something instrumental, something jazz, something ambient. As far as my musical taste, I like all sorts of genres, but for writing, definitely like sort of more somber, darker jazz. That just puts me where my mind needs to go, even when it's not a dark scene. There's just something about that sort of sets my brain to a certain frequency.
And how often do you get to write?
I write definitely not as often as I'd like to, but it has worked into my my routine with kids, with work, with just life stuff. I find it hard to carve out, a set time. But what I've sort of come to terms with is that because time is precious, when I can sort of sneak in time to write, it's really concentrated time, and it's time that I used, I think, to its full extent. I'm a pretty early riser, so I'm usually first in the house up, and often for a while. So if I get up early, I can get in some writing before anything else is going on, and there's no any people distractions, which is fantastic because that's when my writing mind seems to be in its prime. So that's sort of something that's developed over the years, and I'm very happy that that's how it works out.
How long was the process for writing Bad All Day?
The process was way too long. I'd say it was about 7 years. But it was definitely not concentrated, sitting, writing. It was a very fragmented process of, in the beginning, not even knowing it was going to be a book. I used to work, or I used to have a hobby, I should say, of trying to be a filmmaker. And me and some friends did create some projects, nothing that anyone's ever seen. They were just more or less for us, and we've hit a couple film festivals, but that was where my head was at. And I was working on what was going to be another film, but the whole film thing in general was sort of crumbling. People were moving away from it and into different things, and the projects we were trying to take on were just getting beyond our grasp. And finally, it just sort of felt like I was at a crossroads, and I wanted to do something artistically, pardon me, but I couldn't do the film thing anymore. It was just too many people, too much demand, and we weren't really getting what we wanted out of it. So I started writing, and it was being written like a film because that was where I was coming from. But then as I was slowly realizing it should be a project just for me, it became a book, and that transformation took a while. And then just making it into a book versus a movie for me was very... it was something that I really had to work at. And then when I finally came to terms with that, then there was just doing it. I hadn't written a book before, just doing it, and then once again finding time to write when I could, and then the editing. And I guess I'm a very typical artist in that I'm very self-critical. So even when it was done, it didn't feel done. So edit, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Then when that was done, sort of sat on it for a while. And what the idea in my head was that I didn't want to publish it and not have another one sort of already work in the works, because just by any chance, if people were interested, I wanted to be able to say, well, okay, well, there's another one coming soon, so stay tuned. And that idea sort of haunted me for way too long. I was working on the second book, but like the first one was taking forever. So then I just decided, you know what, let's just put it out. So here we are.
Perfect. And now that it's out, where can we find Bad All Day?
The easiest way to find Bad All Day is search for badallday.com, and it's the easiest website to navigate. It's just one page. You'll see what looks like a little radio out of an old car, and there's a couple buttons, but 2 in particular. One is for the ebook and one is for the physical book. If you click on either of those, that will open you up to the links to find either of those.
And then here in the month of April, you have a sale going on Smashwords, correct?
That is correct. It is Bad All Day for $1 on Smashwords.
And then what about your social media handles?
Well, anyone interested can find me on Instagram or TikTok. The handles for both are Amawsley, Amawsley. So check that out.
All right. To kind of kick us back over, what was the biggest challenge you faced while writing Bad All Day?
That's a good question. The biggest challenge for me, I think, was because of the process of trying to knit together all these hundreds of ideas that sort of stood on their own. I was basically starting with too much information, so to speak, and I was trying to make them work in the scenes instead of creating the scene and then creating ideas for said scenes. So because of that, there was a lot of going backwards and moving things around and figuring things out sort of in reverse. I would have scenes later on in the book where I would have these ideas that, I don't have a specific example, but this character says this. But then I would think to myself, well, wait a second, if he says that, does that compromise something from before? And a lot of it was probably overthinking. Would he say something like that? Yeah, you have to do that, but I definitely spent way too much time doing that. But I think in the end, I was able to say, yes, I'm satisfied with how this all worked out. And would I do it differently? No, I probably wouldn't, because there was a reason that I amassed all these ideas over the years, and I have to put them to work.
Do you do your own editing, or do you get other people to edit with you, or a mix of both?
At the moment, I do my own. I did do a sort of a book swap with someone else, and it was a neat experience. I don't even remember how we found each other. It was online somehow, but we traded books, and his was very different than mine. And we did share some notes. It was helpful. We did it for about 6 chapters, and I would do that again. Were I to get just an editor, just hire an editor, yeah, in the future I probably would, but for this first book, I think it had to be done just all me, just by the nature of the book. It is very personal, and editing it allowed me to learn so much more about the process. And I think I know that the next time I work on the book, which is now, I'm thinking about it differently. So I'm able to think about the whole picture, not just living in the moment of creation. I can think about the editing part too, and really boil down, is this the right thing to put on the page right now?
So for new writers, someone maybe not even a true writer yet, someone just thinking about writing, do you have any advice for them? Like, what would be your go-to advice for someone thinking about getting into writing or just starting to write?
The best advice I can give, as I mentioned before, is write down any idea you have, any sentence you hear someone say that you think is cool, any lyric from a song. I'm not suggesting people steal lyrics, but it's just the inspiration of what that lyric said, or anything. Just write it down, and don't ever underestimate the wealth of inspiration in any given moment. And also, if anyone out there is like me, who does not have the greatest memory, who has a memory for seemingly useless facts, but in the moment of needing useful facts, you can't come up with them. But if you have it written down, there's something about writing it down that will sort of trigger that memory. So I know, a very common phrase for what do you do if you want to write? You write. But I twist that a bit and say, yeah, write, but write every idea, not just write something that you think is a complete thought or a complete sentence or a complete paragraph. Just any little scrap of an idea can contribute to something great later on.
And what type of books do you read?
I read, for a writer, I don't read a lot. I read a fair amount. What I like to read is old detective novels from the 50s. Raymond Chandler in particular is a favorite, and there's just something about the hard-boiled genre for me. It really speaks to me, and in the future, I'm sure that'll be a project, is something that harkens back to that age. And on the same token, I love movies based on that era, so I watch a lot of black and white hard-boiled noirs. No, that really gives me a kick. And sort of to jump to far left field from that, I love horrors. One of my favorites is The Exorcist, and just because it gives me so many memories of reading that on night shift at work, and my mind at 3 a.m. was just so pliable for to be horrified, and that really put me in an interesting spot mentally.
That's understandable. Who is your favorite author?
As I mentioned, I guess Raymond Chandler. He was one of the godfathers of noir, and even projects that I work on that don't specifically have they're not in the genre of noir, and they're not a detective novel, but just the way that those characters carried themselves really translates to a lot of my characters, and it's just their confidence and their toughness and their straightforward motivations.
So on to the next one of naming conventions. Where'd you get the name Bad All Day? Was that a tough one to come up with?
That was the easiest title ever for me, but it was purely by chance, because titles are not my strong suit. But as I mentioned, I write everything down. And years ago, my niece was babbling, playing on the floor, babbling on, and she said what I thought sounded like Bad All Day. I don't remember how old she was, 3 or something. And it just jumped out at me. I'm like, that sounds cool. I like that. So I wrote it down on a little piece of paper, and into my shoebox it went. And it wasn't until years later, when I was well into writing the book, I hadn't a title for it, and I came across it, and it just sort of stuck there. I probably pinned it to my corkboard beside my desk and thought, is that the title? And then one day I digested it, and it was the title. And it wasn't until much later that I worked the title into a scene in the book. So the title came well after. So it definitely wasn't title first, and the rest worked from that.
How about the naming conventions of your characters and places in your book?
That's also similar. Like I said, naming isn't my strong suit, but by just collecting names, sometimes I'll just go through phone books. I don't know if people don't really use phone books anymore, but I used to love going through phone books and picking out cool sounding names, just writing down names you come across in everyday life, and they go into the the shoebox, the quote unquote shoebox, to one day maybe be used. The naming for this one, there is a fair amount of characters, and there's on the back of the book, the physical book, there's a map which I did on a piece of sandpaper from work. I love telling that story. It's a large piece of sandpaper, and I brought it home, and I used pastels and watercolors, and I drew out the map. and then I splashed it with water just to give it this sort of, rugged look. And that was the map for my city. And each neighborhood has a specific name, of course. But I really wanted the names to be sort of memorable. And I wanted people to be able to think about and talk about the town almost as if it's their own town or a town they visited.
That's a fascinating story on how the map was created.
Yeah, there's always there's always a silver lining. I work at a mill, and it's not easy work, and it's not glamorous work, but sometimes you can pull a little bit of a diamond out of the rough. So I'm able to scavenge some materials and use them for various projects.
That's awesome. Just out of curiosity, do you have any words that you struggle with spelling or even using throughout your process?
My struggle, I'm fairly good with words, and I guess my struggle would be overusing words. I definitely prefer certain words, and I'll go through something I just wrote and realize I used the same word 3 times. Just, you're in the throes of the writing passion, and you're just writing. You naturally, for me, you're just sort of stuck in I call it the highway hypnosis of writing, where you write and then you stop and then whoa, did I just write that whole page? And it's almost like you didn't even realize it. And that's definitely the sweet spot where you want to be. But when you do that and you go back and edit it, then you realize, oh, geez, I used that word 4 times, or that word really doesn't fit. I can definitely fixate on just the use of a single word. I'm sure all writers do this. I just fixate on, is that the right word? And then you'll go into your thesaurus, and then you'll slot in a new word, and that word works better. But now this other word besides it doesn't work. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't flow. So you can absolutely spend hours just remodeling a sentence.
Yeah, and of course, the rereading sometimes points out where our pet words or pet phrases are that we accidentally use too much, right?
Absolutely.
As a self-published author, how has the marketing been going? Has that been a struggle or working through it?
I don't want to call it a struggle, only because it's something that I'm allowing it to be organic and just learn. I'm doing it all myself at the moment. There will be a point where I definitely bring in, I hire some folks to help, but I wanted to feel it out, just see what it's like out there. And where I'm at right now is I'm just using online tools. Basically, I'm just using social media. I'm trying to connect with different people. I've connected with some people on YouTube, some book reviewers, some people who took my book, and I'm hoping something will come of that. I'm working with somebody on Instagram/TikTok who is going to be helping me with the giveaway that I mentioned. So I'm having a lot of fun meeting people out there, and I'm reaching out to people. People are reaching out to me. It's slow growth, but I'm okay with slow growth. The whole point of this was basically to finish the project, and anything that came after that was basically gravy. So at what point do I, take it to the next step? I'm not sure. Maybe it'll be when the next book comes out and I want to push a little harder. But at the moment, it's definitely interesting, and I'm learning something new all the time.
Do you have any advice for people that are unpublished and toying with the idea of self-publishing?
My only advice would be I do have some good advice, actually. I would say it can be very tempting to want to pay somebody or a service to sort of jump the queue. Then they're going to pop up all the time, and some will say, hey, we'll edit your book, hey, we'll market your book, hey, we'll design your cover, we'll do everything. And it can be very tempting, but my advice would be for people to take a step back and say, is this something I could do myself? For me, luckily, I can do pretty much everything, whether it's something I already knew how to do or something I learned, and just stubbornness. So I'm able to say that I'm, the owner of all my work. But there were times when it just felt like it was going very slow, or it was just so much work. And it's like, hey, maybe I should pay someone and then they could do this part of the project, and then I will be that much further ahead. But it might go well, or it might not go well. And maybe you'll end up with a product from them that wasn't worth the money, or you're not happy with, and you have to do it anyway. So I'm lucky that I'm at this point where I'm looking backwards on all that work, and I didn't pay anybody for it, but the temptation was definitely there. And by no means am I trying to undermine what I'm sure many, many talented people out there who are able to do that work. But I just would say to any artist, if you can own your own work and have complete control, that sometimes that's better than any other short-term benefit these services can give you.
You're kind of saying do what you can, right? Do as much of it as you can that you enjoy doing, right?
Yeah, I'd say that. Do as much as you can. There's also something to be said about knowing your limitations. If there's a portion of the project that's like, you know what, I can't do that, then absolutely bring someone else in. There's nothing wrong about not doing it. But I think if you're going to go down that route, just really know what you want out of it, and make sure that you're not. Make sure that by the time it's done, you should be satisfied with what you're paying for.
Well said. Just to come back to, I remember you saying that you have writings and also voice recordings from years ago that you have for writing inspiration and things like that. When you go back and look at the work you did there, how does that feel compared to now and what you're working on?
Oh, it's a treat. And when you were talking about that, I was having a mental flashback of my first voice recorder, which was the little tapes, like literally the magnetic tape. And I still have it. I have the tapes. Some of them broke, but luckily I transferred those onto digital, so I still have them. But the tapes that do still work, when you play them, it's very scratchy and it sounds like it's from the distant past. It's losing its crispness. But it's interesting. I'll listen to or read something that I wrote from years and years and years ago, and you'd think, wow, how much value could you have from it? A lot of it still has great value, and it might not literally be used. If I wrote an idea for a character or an idea for a scene or a sentence or something, the odds are it's not going to be used exactly like that, but it can be molded into something. And sometimes all it takes is one really good statement or a sentence or even a word, and that just triggers inspiration to carry on into a whole scene.
And that comes back to your advice you stated earlier of write everything down, record it, that way you can come back to it, right?
Absolutely. I'm sure there are writers out there who can sit down and just with what's rattling around in their brain can flesh out a brilliant project. That's not me. I just need to have something that I'm referring to, and I can usually take it from there.
Now, I know Bad All Day was written in kind of an unorthodox manner. Was an outline used for Bad All Day or your next book?
The Bad All Day, there was no outline used. There was a general idea of a band, basically characters starting a band, and that was a vehicle for me to insert as many ideas that I had about bands and music. And I had a lot of musical friends growing up. I'm musical. I was never in a band, but I play guitar and bass. But I was around the music scene a lot, so I had a lot of inspiration for band ideas. So it was a vehicle for me to use those. And then the outline sort of developed as I went. And once again, that's, like I said, that's why it took so long to write, because it was almost like I did one pass, sort of plugging in ideas, and then it did another pass, fleshing out more of a story, and then another pass, and then after so many passes, oh, hey, there's actually a story in here. And with each pass, the themes in between ideas became less and less clear, and it blended together better. The second book, there is more of an outline, and the reason being is because what I did with that was I took a script I wrote from years ago that a project that never got off the ground, and I took a short story that I wrote, and I sort of married them together, and that became the outline for the second book. And once again, like my ideas, it won't it won't look the same in the end, but it'll have been molded into something else. But it's starting me with much more of a foundation this time, so it's been a lot easier to write.
Did any of your characters become more important to the story than you thought they were going to be?
Yeah. It started with just the main character and his band, and the band were basically just there to serve the jokes or the scenes, and they didn't really have much depth. And the amount of depth that they took on through the book was surprising for me. And when I did my last edit, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything, but I had a lot of a lot of great just emotional reactions to some of these scenes, and I don't think I had those reactions when I wrote them. And it's funny how my interpretation of it was different.
The characters and the scenes kind of grew by themselves, right, over time, especially from first writing, so they became more and more as time went on, it sounds like.
They did. And when I first started writing the book, it was so long ago for me that my life's changed a fair amount since I started writing the book. So in some ways I don't feel I'm different, but realistically, yeah, I am quite a bit different. So it does mean a lot of different things, these different scenes.
From going from Bad All Day, the first book, to the new book, has the process from Bad All Day kind of helped you get your flow for writing?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of things that just go on in my head, a lot of things that just the way I treat my working document, there's just little itty bitty shortcuts that you sort of develop over time, but they help so much. Just silly things like when I go through, if I don't like a part of a sentence, or if I don't like a part of the way the scene is going, I'll highlight that red, and that basically means fix this later. Or I'll highlight, I basically have a legend at the top for the colors, what they mean in the document. So purple will mean something, red will mean something. If it's just black, normal typeface, that must be good. And that way I don't have to just sit there and try to work through it in that moment, because at the moment it might not feel right I might not be in edit mode, but I'll know, okay, when I come back to this needs to be changed.
Did you have to do any research for Bad All Day or book 2?
The research that I did basically was, there's no research in terms of historical or scientific context, but the research that I did was basically rereading or rewatching or re-listening to the content that I think inspired me the most to make it, and just keeping it fresh in my mind.
What's your motivating factor for writing? The kind of driving force that keeps you writing, or even started you writing?
Well, the book is autobiographical in that, like Harvey, I've had many different backgrounds. I've dabbled in drawing, painting, filmmaking, music. There was a stretch where I was building instruments, and none of them were quite right. I still do some of them sometimes, but I needed one pursuit that I could sort of hang my hat on and say, this is what I do. And this is something that I can continually do and produce something, so that I'm not just sort of spinning my tires in the mud. There's nothing wrong with having hobbies and interests and just doing something just to do them. But for me, I had to have at least one artistic pursuit that I could say, if I had to choose any one, this is the one thing I do.
And when you're describing a scene in your book, how descriptive do you get? Do you kind of keep it light, or do you embellish?
I definitely embellish. The Bad All Day really takes place in Harvey's interpretation of what he's seeing. And if I could offer a roadmap for that book, it is a blending of what's actually happening in the scene and what he is seeing in his mind, what he's making of the scene. And the characters and the world that he exists in is very strange on its own, and then what he does with it is very strange. So it can be difficult to tell the difference between, I guess, if you want to call it reality versus fantasy, but it isn't really important, because the point of the book is just how he's living through this experience. The second book, I'm embellishing less. The main character is a little bit more of a straight shooter, and I wanted to just make it a bit shorter, a bit punchier. It's still very me. It's very busy, and there's a lot to chew on in each scene, but it's just a little bit less embellishment. But the first one, yeah, the embellishments, I hope are they serve the scene. There's probably times when some readers will think it's too much, but I think if it's something that you enjoy, really living in a scene and really just sort of drinking it in, then you'll really enjoy it.
Did you take any classes or schooling for writing?
No, I have not taken any classes for any of the artistic pursuits that I've had. I worked for a violin maker years ago when I was making instruments, and from that I jumped into making my own guitars. But in terms of writing, it's always just something I've done. And similar to learning music, people who learn it not through classes but just by themselves will always say, I did it the hard way. Whereas things might have been quicker or easier or more natural learning it from somebody or learning it to read music or such. But just by doing it by myself, I sort of developed my own style and my own weird way of doing things. And it was probably a lot longer. And I'm sure if I had gone through schooling for it, I could have learned some tricks. But I'm happy with the way things went.
Oh yeah, plus the way we journey through life can shape the way that we do things like writing and everything like that. We each have a unique perspective on how we exist, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of style and in terms of doing things in a way that a reader might appreciate the work more, or it might be more user-friendly. There's probably a lot that I could have learned and still have to learn, but I can also appreciate that you just sort of have to stumble your way through it.
Out of curiosity, are there any other genres you might switch to for a later book, such as horror? I did hear you say that you like horror.
I do love horror. I don't have a whole lot of ideas for horror in my shoebox for some reason. Horror is a genre that I am okay with being a viewer or a reader. I love it, but it's for some reason I don't think I could write it. I do have a lot of ideas for writing as I mentioned, a noir sort of detective series. So whether that's a book or whether I try to make that into something in film again, I don't know. But that's definitely something I could see myself doing.
So as part of the marketing for your book, how does it feel to be doing the interviews and all of that?
I love it. I haven't done interviews for anything in a long time. When I was doing the film thing, I would take on the marketing for that, but it was a lot of how do I describe it? It wasn't so much marketing the book. It was more so, the films. We were doing film festival circuits, so it was just really little promo pieces, and I had to say as much as I could in a very short amount of time. So I like the interview format way more, where I can just sort of ramble on, and hopefully it gets edited in a appropriate way.
Yeah, luckily our editors are pretty good, because I know I make mistakes.
Excellent.
So out of curiosity, do you have any last topics or anything you'd like to cover before we start wrapping up?
The only thing I'd say is one thing I'm finding being on this part of the journey is I'm meeting great people who are very supportive of indie and very supportive of just artists coming out of the woodwork and, presenting their stuff that they did in their basement, in their attics, just, very much not the mainstream, just people that are looking to support each other. And I'd say, be open to those arms. There's lots of people out there who are trying to connect with others, and there's these networks that we can all create. And just like this interview, it's sprung out of a connection that popped out of nowhere. So I think more so than ever, it's important that indie artists strive to reach out to other people, whether it's not just on the internet locally. There's tons of connections we can make, and it just makes us all stronger.
100%. And I love talking to indie authors. And on that note, if you want to be on the show, go to theindiebubble.com/submission and note down that you want to work with Wordsmiths, and we'll get you on the show and we'll talk. Abbott, if you could hit me with your socials one more time.
Absolutely. So on Instagram and TikTok, you can find me at Amawsley. It's AMAWSLEY. And don't forget Battle Day for $1 on smashwords.com.
Perfect. And that's the second episode of Words with Wordsmiths. Thank you very much, Abbott. I had a great time.
Me too. Thank you very much.
And for Words with Wordsmiths, if you're going to find us, you're going to find us on TikTok and Instagram, and it is the name Words with Wordsmiths Pod. And once again, if you want to be on the show, theindiebubble.com/submission, or reach out on Instagram or TikTok. Thank you all, and I hope to be doing many more of these.